picked up, reaching for the end zone. Touchdown. What a start.
Give it to Reed, and there he goes. Nobody's going to catch him. Touchdown.
It's caught. Jeremiah Smith. Touchdown, Ohio State. The legend grows.
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast. All right, welcome in everyone. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. Hope you guys are having a wonderful time on this Tuesday night. We are the College Fantasy Football Podcast on the Campus to Canton Podcast Network. You can find us on all of your podcast feeds and on YouTube every Monday morning and Tuesday night during the season. If you want to support the great work we do here, head on over to campustocanton.com. Subscribe there with any of our phenomenal tiers. We've got content ranging on all sorts of college football games, whether it is CFF, Devy, C2C, college DFS, underdog best ball competitions. If you play it, then we've got content, whether that's tools, rankings, pretty much everything you need to succeed. In fact, right now, if you want to support the show even further, make sure when you go to sign up for one of our yearly membership tiers, you use that promo code Natty, N-A-T-T-Y, to get 10% off your yearly membership. Again, that is promo code Natty, N-A-T-T-Y. If you can't do that, totally fine. You can just show us some love by leaving a like, a comment, and subscribe on the YouTube side of things. If you're on the podcast side of things, just leave a 5-star review and make sure you are following the show. Not only does that show us support, but also the entire game of college fantasy football in general, a ton of support. If you have any further questions or want to get in touch for whatever reason, you can find me and the show on Twitter. I'm at CFF_Jared. The show is at Chasing the Natty. Welcome back, y'all. Raise of hands or like the video or whatever you guys want to end up doing in the chat if you guys are one win away from locking up a playoff spot this week, because I feel like that's where pretty much everybody's at this week that is still fighting. Like I said in the show earlier this week, it really does feel like this is a year where, again, partially I think it's because of the way that the CFF community and just the content creation game around CFF community has helped out a lot of people in terms of being more competitive in their leagues. But really, it just, in all of my leagues, I don't think there's a single, like, truly set playoff for the most part. It's been a very competitive year, and so a lot of us are still fighting for spots out here. I'm happy to say that in pretty much every one of my leagues, I am still alive. I'm definitely not guaranteed by any stretch to make the playoffs in all of them. But, I imagine a lot of you guys who are in multiple leagues are in the same position. So here we are. We are here to answer y'all's questions. You guys pretty much know the drill by now, but I will reiterate regardless. This is a live stream. This is basically a glorified office hours. This is mostly to answer your start-sit questions for the week, but we can answer other things as well. Again, we got the rest of season rankings up over at campustocanton.com. We can talk about that a little bit more here in a second. But as we get closer to the end of the season, I know some of you play some Dynasty. I know some of you play some Keeper Leagues and stuff like that. So if you want to throw those questions into the chat as well, I haven't given a ton of thought, obviously, regarding, what's going to happen next year. And obviously, there's still so much for us to know given between now and the end of the regular season, let alone, the playoff and bowl games and everything that come after that. But, it is a fun time to kind of begin speculating on that, thinking about what could end up happening. So all of those questions are out there. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. And again, before we get too far here, I do want to once again talk about the rest of season rankings available over at campustocanton.com. They are there under the CFF tab. These are effectively projections plus, right? This is my own algorithm that I have developed, right? And it is mostly algorithmically based. I unfortunately don't have time to go and hand rank every single one of these guys. I do a little hand fudging here and there where I can, but I really do try to kind of let the algorithm work on its own. And it ranks the players in two different ways. One is just total fantasy points left. So if you're looking for just the guys that are going to score you the most amount of points total, this is heavily influenced obviously by who has bye weeks and who does not left. You can rank by that. If you're just somebody who you're confident in your ability to pick up guys during bye weeks, especially during playoffs, and you just want to know the guys that are going to get you the most fantasy points per game, it also ranks it by that as well. You can even see the current ranking that they have, as well as the current value they have in terms of fantasy points per game and what they're expected to do the rest of the season, like the difference between the two. So, like, for example, just pulling it up here for myself, Byron Brown, it had it. I'm not sure where it's gone now, but Byron Brown, right? Like, fantasy points per game up until this point was about 31 points per game, and rest of the season we got him projected at 36 points per game. So about a full 5-point jump there, which is absolutely crazy, right? So yeah, go check that out. Those are available, again, over at campusofcanton.com. A huge help here towards the end of the season. And with that being said, let's get to y'all's questions. And once again, I will give you a quick reminder to everybody about my rules here, although I have been a little loose with them recently. But again, just in general, try to give me no more than 3 players. Please tell me how many you need to start among those 3 players. And also, please give me the opponents. That helps me out a ton. As much as I would love to, I do not memorize every single matchup going into the week. And so, like, just having that right there in front of me helps me out a ton. So, appreciate all the shout outs in the chat and everything. I'm glad those of you like Riff Ram here telling me how I've helped you guys get to this point in the season. I appreciate all of you guys. I'm glad I'm able to help you guys out with that. Let me also fix my screen here for a second. Good Lord. Fix that. Wow. That went way off the screen. There we go. But let's start with Dan's question here. Dan was the first one in the chat with a question here. He says, "Hey, Jared." Hello, Dan. "Need to win a..." Oh, I just also realized I have screwed this up once again. Let's try fixing this one more time. All right, there we go. Nailed it. Sorry. I got distracted by my... almost messed it up again. I'm just on it tonight. Sorry, Dan. Let's get back to your question here, man. He says, "Need to win to clinch a playoff spot, as I imagine a lot of us do here tonight. Need to pick one running back in full-point PPR leagues. King Miller versus Northwestern, Keyjuan Brown versus Cal, or Dior Hubbard versus Colorado. Thanks." Yeah, Dior Hubbard, man. That's definitely one that I've been getting some questions about. Obviously, I talked about both, Jordan Marshall and Keyjuan Brown being huge pickups this week at the running back position just because of the guys injured in front of them. And I did not mention Dior Hubbard, although a lot of you have started asking me about him, because he does seem like, as of this moment, the heir apparent to Jaheim White, and then afterwards Ty Edwards. He had 29 carries last week, over 100 yards. He looks like he is the Rich Rodriguez RB1 for right now. I personally wasn't quite there in terms of being ready to believe that. Again, it could have been very well a hot hand situation. I just need to see one more week. But he does have Colorado this week. Colorado, horrendous versus the run. Just pulling up our stats here. Yeah, Colorado, bottom 7 in the country, giving up over 200 yards on the ground per game. Recently, in the last 3 games, they've been giving up almost 300 yards per game on the ground. So obviously, that's a very feastful spot to look at Hubbard there. Keyjuan Brown has a nice matchup against Cal, and then King Miller going up against Northwestern. I don't think Northwestern has a particularly stout... Yeah, there we go. Perfectly average. 62 in the country, giving up just under 150 yards per game. So that's not a great matchup, but the benefit of King Miller here is the fact that he is the most known commodity among these 3 guys, although all 3 of these guys obviously are relatively new to the scene because of guys in front of them getting injured. Let's take a look at these matchups in terms of a point spread and game total perspective. Let's go to Northwestern here. Again, 51.5 over under 51.5, game spread at 14.5. So probably playing from, or never mind, we're looking at USC's perspective here. So probably playing from ahead there. Decent amount of scoring expected for USC. An average run defense. So I would say we can expect an average performance from King Miller there. Let's go look at West Virginia. Yeah, over under 54.5. West Virginia favored by 6.5 points. So plenty of scoring opportunities. If you think that he's the Rich Rodriguez RB1, that's a very fruitful matchup there. And then I think Louisville Cal might be... Yeah, okay, well, yeah, I'm going on a lot because I've been really trying to, like, as I go through this, trying to find that one thing that's going to really stick out to me as like, yeah, definitely start this guy among the rest, or to maybe knock one of these guys out. But all three of these guys got pretty good matchups here. I would say we key in on Keyjuan Brown or Dior Hubbard here. I know King Miller is kind of the known commodity among these three guys here, at least relatively, but Northwestern's defense can be pretty stout on certain days, so I will say just maybe avoid that possibility there. I would lean towards Keyjuan Brown here. Obviously, I recommended him earlier this week. I think Cal's one of his better matchups here towards the end of the stretch. I think we've seen more from him compared to Hubbard, and so let's just play it safe there. We'll go with Brown over Hubbard, Dan. Let's move on to our next question. Comes to us from Brandon. Brandon says, Jackson Harris versus San Diego State University or Parker Kingston versus Texas Tech. This is a kind of a fun one because you have two really, and I mean really good defenses here going on, where San Diego State, surprisingly, just across the board, been very, very stout. Like, we normally think of, oh my God, I can't remember the head coach, Sean Lewis. We normally think of Sean Lewis, we think of offense, right? Their defense has been carrying the day for the Aztecs this year. You can see here, number 15th versus the pass, giving up just under 175 yards per game. And then I believe on the other side here, yeah, top 15 versus the run as well, giving up just under 100 yards rushing. That's been very impressive. But then you have the other side of it here. Texas Tech, number 1 rush defense, and I think their secondary, secondary a little bit more vulnerable, number 40 in the country here, giving up just over 200 yards per game. But again, that's not a huge difference between those two. So yeah, it comes down to who can you expect to do better? I personally already kind of favor Jackson Harris just in general. Again, I think he's had, 3-4 straight 100-yard games off the top of my head. Let me just double check that real quick. I want to make sure it's definitely 3 at least. Yeah, 4 straight 100-yard games. 3 of those 4 games, you get 2 touchdowns in either of them. Obviously, I'm not expecting that every single weekend, but it is very clear that Alejado loves him some Jackson Harris right now. I would say I would trust the possibility of Harris in that Hawaii offense overwhelming that San Diego State defense more than Parker Kingston and Bear Bryant, Bear Bachmeier and that BYU offense overwhelming Texas Tech. I think Tech's got more talent on defense. I think that they are built more to shut down their current level versus, San Diego State G5 level. There's always a possibility where they can kind of be caught off guard one day. So I would say, Brandon, let's go with Jackson Harris. Let's hope he keeps that streak of 100-yard games going here. Let's see. David Burley says, sup, Jared. Sup, David. Need to win to get in, as do we all, my friend. Sit 1 between Keyjuan Brown versus Cal, Adam Randall versus Florida State, or Jacoby Williams versus BYU. BYU's defense, if I remember correctly, pretty solid. Okay, average. Pretty average. 148 yards, 0.6 yards per game. They're giving up a little bit more of that in recent games, so obviously that's a little bit of help there. But, I mean, Jacoby Myers has been great along with Dickey. My question to you, David, is, as a Jacoby Williams manager, clearly, do you feel good every week knowing which player is which running back's gonna go off for Texas Tech at any given point between Jacoby Williams and Cam Dickey? Because boy, I have not been able to figure that formula out. If you have, I would greatly like to hear it. Projections like Jacoby Williams here. Adam Randall definitely the best one on the bunch here at 16.84. I was a little worried about Randall last week because it does seem like they're trying to get Davison more and more involved, but he still ended the day with like 16 carries for 84 yards and 2 touchdowns. So very much still involved. Obviously projections are liking him as well. Keyjuan Brown, obviously a big unknown here, but I'm just personally, as it stands, leaning towards sitting Jacoby Williams. Mostly because, again, I'm not sure who's going to really go off between him or Dickey versus we know Keyjuan Brown should be the RB1 for Louisville this week. We know that Adam Randall will be the RB1 for Clemson going into this week. I will go ahead and take a look here at the over-under. Okay, over-under here, 52.5, 9.5 point spread. So that's not terrible. Jacoby Williams can definitely do some work in there. Meanwhile, I think Clemson, 56.5. Clemson favored by, no. Okay, that must have been open like preseason or something like that. Because favored by 2 points. So plenty of scoring opportunities on both sides here in that game. Yeah, I think I'm just going to go with sitting Jacoby Williams here. I think that, you play with the 2 RB1s that you have there and just roll with that, David. But why did it go and log me out? That's not nice. Log back in. All right. And let's move on to Joe Webb's question here. He says, I need to start 1.5 PPR format. Demond Claiborne versus Virginia, Kendrick Raphael versus Louisville, or Miles Davis versus Nevada. I don't love any of these matchups. Oops. Let me go ahead and type them in here. So we got Claiborne going up against Virginia. Yeah, RB56. It's just pretty disappointing from Claiborne all around this year, mostly because he was injured and, Wake Forest just kind of sucks. Raphael has been phenomenal the last couple of weeks. 6 touchdowns in 2 games. You have to wonder if that continues, but, it's very clear that when they get down near the goal line, they're just going to continue to hand it off to Raphael every single time. I don't believe that Vegas is expecting Cal to not put up a ton of points here. And then you got Miles Davis going up against Nevada. Nevada, a very sneaky G5 defense so far. Like, let's take a look at this real quick. So, like, Nevada, number 46 versus the pass, which is obviously important for Davis because he catches a lot of balls out of the backfield. And then the rushing, still pretty average, only 156. But again, this is not really a defense that you can really take care of. Utah State's been on a bit of a skid recently, so I would be a little worried about that. Meanwhile, let's take a look at this Louisville-Cal matchup. I already mentioned this is a pretty solid matchup for Kejuan Brown. Yeah, Louisville favored by almost 20 points in this game. I would worry a bit about Raphael getting game scripted out of this a little bit, although let me take a look. I don't remember if he has gotten a ton of receiving work. Oh my goodness, this app, I swear. Okay, never mind. I'm a little bit of a liar. He's getting anywhere from 2 to 4 catches every single game. So there's a little bit of help there, right? Oh God, he has been so good recently. So good. But again, these are some bad defenses he's faced, but this UVA defense was pretty solid against the run. And he was held in check. Again, that's the thing with Kendrick Raphael, right? Is that his efficiency's terrible. But boy, are they going to try to get him touchdowns. I mean, look at this. Again, 6 touchdowns the last 2 games. Even before that, he was good for a touchdown a game. So there's probably a really safe floor here with Kendrick Raphael. Again, all 3 of these guys are facing tougher defenses this week. Louisville in particular, though, I think is top 25 versus the run. Where are you? There it is. Yeah. Okay, top 26. My bad. But again, the thing with Raphael, right, is that you go for the touchdowns. And I think that's the way I'm going to lean here. I think we're going to lean towards the guy that is has a very good shot at scoring 1 to 2 touchdowns in this game. Versus Claiborne Wake Forest could get shut out by Virginia, and then Utah State has a lot of different guys that can score touchdowns. Their RB1 not really being close to the top of that, at least compared to Cal. So I think we just go with Raphael there, Joe. Next up, let's go to CD. He says, hey, Jared, which quarterback to start this week? I know I put 4 options, but I never got my questions answered last week. CD, I am so sorry about that, man. I guess I just did not see your questions. Obviously, this is the way to do it. If you didn't get your questions answered last week, make sure you come on the live show and get your questions in here. So we got Fagnano versus Duke, Brandon Lewis versus Tulane, Mensa versus UConn, Julian Sayin at Purdue. So, wow, we got a bunch of names here, a bunch of guys that have all done pretty dang well. But let's go ahead and throw all these guys into here. Fagnano projected very well for our group here, and I totally understand why. Duke's defense is absolutely horrendous, especially their secondary. We saw it especially last week against Clemson. There's a lot of points to be earned there. And then let's get Sayan in here as well. So again, according to our projections, you don't really have a losing pitch here. I would say Fognato's a definite start. Again, dual threat ability going up against a terrible defense in Duke. I think that, it's hard to go wrong there. He's been great so far this year. Where is Fognato on the year? Yeah, QB 20 onto the year. He's been on fire the last couple of weeks, so I feel pretty good about that one. The rest are a little more. You do kind of wonder what you want to do there, right? Brendan Lewis, where's Lewis? I thought I saw him around here. No, not Julian Lewis. Brendan Lewis. There you go. Okay, I knew I saw him up top. So he's QB 14 on the year, but again, he's got, what is it, Tulane? Let's check out Tulane's defense here. Tulane, 93rd versus the pass, so that's already pretty promising. And then Tulane against the run, average versus the run. Yeah, this might be one of those cases where I'm going to disagree with the projections here. I might actually go Lewis and Fognato. Just do your two dual threat guys there. You didn't put any scoring options in the chat saying that, this is a 6-point passing touchdown league or anything. So I'm going to lean towards that. Sayan versus Purdue sounds like a spicy matchup, but that could very well turn into a CJ Donaldson and James People and Bo Jackson show where, those guys have not really been fed a ton of touchdowns recently. So I could absolutely see this being a spot where they, I could see that being a spot where they, let those guys feast a little bit. So a little worried about there. And then Mensa versus UConn, a good matchup, but let's just go with the two dual threat guys here in Fognato and Lewis. So, you said which QB? Yeah, QB, I would just go with Fognato and just go from there. All right, Tyler says, going to break the rules straight away. Start 2, full PPR. Katron Allen versus Indiana. Hemby at Penn State. Jaden Bradley at Colorado State, or Amari Miller at West Virginia. So I'm going to immediately throw out Hemby because, again, that Indiana backfield has just not been a ton of fun to try to project week in and week out. Penn State, for all their faults, still has a pretty solid defense, so I definitely would not go that direction. We could take a look at Jaden Bradley here. Again, our wide receiver 69 on the week. Probably scroll down a bit so you guys can see it. And then you got Amari Miller, who I do like, and he's been great the last couple of weeks. Our projections haven't quite caught up there, but I think that he'll benefit week in and week out. And then Katron Allen. Yeah, I think but Indiana's defense is so dang good. It is full PPR. So, hold on, let me take a look at Amari Miller. I know he's gotten a lot of touchdowns recently, but I want to make sure that, we're getting some solid volume here to take advantage. 15 targets in the last 2 games, 5 touchdowns the last 4 games. I would say he's a start among these guys right here. And then Jaden Bradley in a full PPR league, which that's not what I have up here, but I was looking at this earlier because I do have him in the Kings Classic League. And, in a full PPR league, he's good for a solid 10 points pretty much every single week. And, you can get a touchdown bonus in there. That's great and all. I would say that's the way I'm leaning. I just really don't want to trust any team against Illinois or Indiana's defense right now. I feel like that's asking for disaster. And then Hemby trying to guess that Indiana backfield right now, I wouldn't do that. So, Tyler, I would go with your 2 wide receivers there, especially in a full PPR league. So, Amphibious Angler, to answer your question, no, unfortunately, I do not have the Ohio-Miami game on in the background, and given what I'm seeing in the score, probably for the best. Otherwise, you guys would see me falling asleep right about now. So, let's take a look at B. Johnstone here. He says, need 2 quarterbacks in a 4-point passing touchdown league. Stockton versus Mississippi State. Wegman versus UCF. Hoover versus Iowa State. Mayava versus Northwest. You guys are really pushing it with giving me 4 different guys, man. Yeah, let's go ahead and plug this into the projections here. Stockton, you said Wegman. We got Hoover. And we have Mayava. Mayava a bit on a skid recently. Obviously, this is the tougher portion of the season. If you see my rest of season rankings, you will see that Mayava is not projected to do as well the last couple of games of the season compared to how he was to start the season. Same with Makai Lemon, right? So that's obviously a little bit worrying. Projections, though, still loving him. They got him at 27 points. Hoover, I'm kind of shocked that they expect, or projections expecting to see Hoover do this well. Again, granted, it is 6-point passing touchdowns here in these projections, but I'd be curious. Oh, let me take a look at the matchups here. So TCU, I would say, wow, that's a higher over/under than I was expecting. Maybe I'm over assuming on what Iowa State's defense is like. Okay, they're average versus the pass, and then against the run, they're pretty average there as well. So I guess that just means you would expect an average performance out of Hoover. So I don't know if that's really QB6 on the week, but something to keep in mind. Weigman's been on fire recently. They got UCF this week. UCF, again, at least according to Fantrax and everything, it seems like they got UCF rated pretty highly in terms of being able to stop things. I know, UCF 18th versus the pass, giving up 178 yards per game. And then against the run, I think they're a little bit more susceptible here. Yeah, but still pretty average, right? So that's definitely a matchup to worry about there with Wigman, but I don't know. Again, he's got the dual threat ability. And then Georgia versus Mississippi State, I'm curious. I haven't actually looked at that despite it being my dogs. I don't know. I know what the general, I know the spread. I know the spread's like 7.5. There it is. Over under of 57.5. So both teams expected to score in this game pretty well. Stockton's, I say Stockton is definitely one of the safer plays here just because of that. Which, again, according to projections, he's actually the lowest ranked among these guys. But, what'd you say? You said 4-point passing touchdown. So 4-point passing touchdown league, I think I would lean towards the 2 dual threat guys, which are here at the bottom. If you're, I guess John or B. Johnstone, my question to you is, if you are going for, also real quick, I forgot to talk about Mayava. I don't trust this projection for Mayava. Again, Northwestern is definitely one of the tougher secondaries he's faced. Obviously, Nebraska was the toughest secondary he faced last week, but let's just say he did not pass that. He did not pass that test, right? Oh, typed in the wrong thing. Mayava, because Mayava ended the day with very pedestrian. But yeah, 9 completions on 23 attempts for 135 yards, 5.9 yards per attempt, easily his lowest on the season. So that does make me worry about Mayava moving forward. Northwestern, another pretty solid secondary that he's going up against. So I would definitely take out. I would take out Mayava here. Yeah, just go to the tool dual threat guys. I think they'll provide you a safer floor. If you're really shooting for ceiling, maybe go Hoover versus Iowa State. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts there. Next question up comes to us from Tim Jones Knows. He says, "Hey Jared, how are we thinking here? Need to start 1 full point PPR. Craver at Mizzou, Brennan Thompson or Anthony Evans versus Georgia. Thanks for the advice always." I would stay away from Craver, man. Like, it's just not been working out recently. He started off so hot towards the start of the season, has really, really cooled off, has not had a 100-yard game since the first couple weeks, hasn't had a 50-yard game in his last 2 games, despite the fact that Texas A&M needed to score 40-plus points in both of those games. That is hugely, hugely concerning for Craver's value moving forward. Mizzou's a tough defense. I would avoid that. That leaves either Brennan Thompson or Anthony Evans versus Georgia. Tim, I don't like you. You're making me pick between 2 guys that should tear up my dog secondary this week. I would go this is a bit narrative streetish, but Anthony Evans going up against his former team in Georgia. They've been susceptible to these shifty slot wide receivers. Evans has been on an absolute tear recently. Brendan Thompson obviously kind of coming back a little bit as well, but Evans was huge last week in the game against Arkansas. He's had 30 targets over the last 3 games. I don't see how that doesn't continue, especially since every team and their mother can throw on Georgia's secondary right now. I would go with Anthony Evans. Just go for, especially full PPR, just go for the volume play there. All right, Todd Skids is still undefeated, but there are still 2 one-loss teams in the 32 field. Lots of questions, but I'll start with this. Lemon versus Northwestern, Keyshawn Singleton versus, he said versus someone. That's the first time somebody just said, I forget who they're starting against this week. You decide. Or Keyshawn Brown versus UConn. Obviously, that Duke-UConn game should be pretty high scoring for the most part. Actually, like Vegas, I'm curious to see what they have. Yeah, 65.5. Duke favored by about 10 points. There's going to be points galore in that game. It's just with Keyshawn Brown, you're absolutely fighting against, the likes of Cooper Barquet, Andrew Anthony. There's a lot of different guys that can score touchdowns on that team. Lemon, the clear guy versus Northwestern, but I've already talked about how I am concerned about USC's passing game in the second half of the schedule here. And then you got Keyshawn Singleton, one of the more disappointing guys on the season. Let's plug these guys into our projections just to kind of see where we have them. Projections still like Lemon, but they also like Maava, so I will stand put and say that I don't believe in this projection quite as much for Lemon here. I think we'll have another one of his lower ceiling games, but Singleton, not great against UTSA there. Again, Koger has really been the guy for Byron Brown recently. With Singleton, you're having to rely on a big play there, and I don't know if that's something you really want to be doing this late. And then you got Keyshawn Brown going up against that UConn defense. Again, wide receiver 60 on the week. I think you still start a stud here. As much as I'm hesitant with USC's passing game here, like Lemon's just been an absolute stud so far this season. I don't think Brown or Singleton are really, target hogs by any stretch of the imagination that you need to start them over Lemon. So, yeah, I would say let's just keep going with your stud here. Let's go Mekhi Lemon and don't look back. Let's see. Miss Rev 42 says, "Hey Jared, hey Miss Rev. Hoover, Brad Jackson, or Collier start 1 standard scoring." So Collier was one of the guys I threw out there on the waiver wire show this week. Obviously, he has been great for Coastal Carolina the last couple of weeks, but I very much threw him out there as a great starting option for people who need to fill in a bye week. When you got Hoover going up against Iowa State in a game that's expected to hit the 30s for both teams, and Brad Jackson going up against Louisiana, who is terrible against the run, especially rushing quarterbacks, we can throw out Collier here. So that leaves Brad Jackson or Hoover. I said it before, I'm not quite buying Hoover at 27 points here. Brad Jackson hitting 27 points, totally can see that this weekend. That Texas State-Louisiana matchup is very, 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 very spicy. Yeah, 64.5 over-under. Texas State favored by 2.5 points. There could be a ton of points put up in that game. I think you just ride with a guy that has just frankly scored more on the season. Where are you, Brad? Yeah, QB 17 on the year is Brad Jackson so far versus Hoover. Yeah, down here at QB 31. So I would just keep it going with Brad Jackson here. JRB Train says, "What's up, Jared? What's up, JRB Train? Have some wide receivers that I hope you can rank for rest of season, especially weeks 13 and 14. Cooper Barquet versus UNC, and Wake. Braden Pegan versus Fresno and Boise, and Amari Thomas versus TCU and Baylor." All right, let's take a look and see if we have these guys in our rankings here. Again, my rankings do only show my top. Again, these are my wide receivers. So top 86 or 84 wide receivers. So if their names don't come up, that is obviously not a great expecting. Okay, non-PPR. Thank you, Jeremy Train. All right, so Barcate, I've got him ranked at wide receiver 25 for... Oh, no, excuse me. I got him ranked at wide receiver 33 in total points, wide receiver 40 in terms of fantasy points per game the rest of the season. We got Pegan, who I've got at 32 for total, 38 for fantasy points per game. So, again, that's very, very close with those two right there. And then you said Amari Thomas as well. Oh, Amari Thomas not showing up in my top 84. Let me go take a look at the back end and see where Amari Thomas, or no, I just didn't spell his name correctly. That doesn't help. But also, he's not projected super high in terms of my projections, and I am curious as to why. I think a lot of it has to do, it seems, with... Yeah, it looks like a lot of it has to do with the fact that he is not projected to do extremely well this weekend against UCF, at least in my numbers. He's got 7.6 points projected for this upcoming weekend in a half PPR format. Then he has a bye, and then he has two matchups here. Like, he has two matchups there at the end with TCU and Baylor, and he's expected to score about 12 to 15 points in both of those. So, yeah, it looks like Amari Thomas, the lowest among the bunch. I wouldn't be shocked, though, if he rises comparatively. But, yeah, that's my rest of season projections on those guys right there. If you're asking me, Jeremy Train, who would I drop among those three? That's a tough call because I think all three of those guys are going to be pretty dang good. I don't know. I would say that maybe a hot take. I might drop Barcate again just because there is so much. There's less target consolidation there compared to Amari Thomas at Houston and Braden Pegan at Utah State. Plus, UNC's defense is getting better by the week. Wake Forest has always had a pretty solid defense this year, so I would probably lean that way and disagree with my rest of season projections just on my own gut feel here. So, Todd, we already answered one of your questions, Todd, so we'll get back to you at the end if we have some time. Rishi Patel joins the chat. He says, between Kendrick Raphael versus Louisville and Easton Messer versus Tulsa, who do you start at the flex? I got Messer in right now. And then, yes. So a lot of this would boil down to Rishi if this is a PPR league or not. I don't know if you're still listening, so if you could drop that in the chat real quick, if you can, that would help me answer this a lot. But we can go ahead and see what projections have here. Oh, yes, PPR league. Okay, so that'll help us out with the projections here. Messer disappointing, but projections still love him just because of the sheer volume that he gets in the PPR. And then Raphael going up against Louisville. We've got him projected higher, 15.34 fantasy points. Messer hits this 14.2 fantasy points here just with pure volume and production alone. Again, he's gotta hit a touchdown at some point this season. But I keep saying that, and it doesn't feel like we're ever going to get it. Let's take a look at the matchups here. Okay, let's just try Tulsa. That might be easier. Okay, so it was FAU. This is a good matchup, though, for Messer. 64.5 over-under. FAU favored by 3.5 points. A lot of close football here to be played. I think I might lean towards that because I talked about Raphael. Raphael's a very safe floor, but there's a very solid chance he could get game scripted out. Louisville's favored by almost 3 touchdowns in that matchup there. And yeah, Raphael can still fall into the end zone, but you give me a very inefficient back and a possibility of getting game scripted out. That's a scary combination to me. I would rather go with Messer in the shootout potential here. So yeah, I would go with Messer there, Rishi. Joe Scott, let's go to your question next. He says, full PPR, who would you start at a flex? Sheldon Sampson, Antonio Williams, or Junior Vander Ross? 10 yards per point. 1 PPR, 150-yard bonus. So 5-point bonus at 150 yards. So, yeah. let's go ahead and plug all three of these guys into the projections, mostly because I need to make sure I know who they're all facing. Just off the top of my head, Vander Ross. I think Vander Ross is facing NIU this week, and I want to give a shout out to Justice, who is in our Campus to Canton Discord. He also does obviously great work over with the G5 Hive, and he put a great message in the chat this morning, because when you think NIU, you think that you think pretty tough defense, right? But he brought in some really, really good numbers from his stuff over there at the G5 Hive website. I'm trying to find it. I'm trying to stall so I can actually find the message, because he had really, really good stuff that basically pointed out that NIU's weakness on defense has been slot wide receivers. And that's where Vander Ross is. And I want to give the actual numbers that he gave, but there's too many dadgum people talking in this chat, and I cannot find it now. I am beside myself. Let me see. Go a little bit farther back. Was it in the NIL chat, maybe? I feel like that might be where he was more inclined to share. You know what? I can actually just search Vander Ross. Sorry, y'all. This is too good not to share with you guys. Yeah. All right. Oh no, never mind. It was not. Was it Justice or was it Luke? I'm trying to see. Dadgummit. Whoever's Milo is, and it won't let me see the actual name. So Luke or Justice, whoever it was, my apologies for not getting it right. But NIU is currently allowing 28.59 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Junior gets a vast majority of his points when teams play zone. NIU plays zone 71.9% of the time. They also let up more points to the slot, 15.8 fantasy points per game, and that is where Junior lines up. Again, great numbers from the team over at G5 Hive, and I want to give them a shout out for great stuff that they're bringing to the table. So, yeah, NIU looks like a bad matchup on paper, but there's a lot to be excited about for our projections, like Vander Ross there. Antonio Williams against Florida State, both teams expected to score in the high 20s. Given what we saw from Antonio Williams last week, it's pretty clear that they're going to try to feed him a ton going forward. Turns out he was the missing link for this offense in big ways. And then Sheldon Sampson, that great matchup for Texas State. He's been on fire recently. You got three really, really good options here. But I think we're going to go... Let me compare recent volume. I think, because in a full PPR league, I think I'm going to lean towards the guy that has been getting steady volume. Vander Ross, 33 targets over the last 3 games. Antonio Williams, I gotta remember to make sure I touch his rushing attempts as well. Yeah, so we're talking about 11, 19, just above that as well, and then Sampson, I don't think has gotten quite that volume. Yeah, Sampson's been good, not great. I think he's an easy, not drop, but an easy sit between these 3 guys. That leaves Antonio Williams versus Vander Ross. Let's see what touchdown opportunities we have here. Oh God, not nearly good enough. Yeah, let's just go with Antonio Williams and hope for a potential shootout between Clemson and Florida State there. So, hope that answers your question, Joe. Let's see. More questions here. Footballer1 says, "Hey Jared, hey Footballer1. Wondering about starting Tony versus Cuse or Kingston versus Texas Tech this week. Just not even putting names into projections or anything. I'm gonna go with Tony here. Syracuse is just such a much better matchup than Texas Tech. Tony's also been on fire in terms of the volume every single week recently. Hasn't found the end zone recently, if I recall correctly. I think the last 2 games he's been kept out of the end zone. Yes, or last 2 games. He had a rushing touchdown 3 weeks ago against Louisville. But again, 13 targets last week. He's going to have great volume. Syracuse, a defense that Carson Beck and Miami should absolutely dice up this weekend. And then you got Parker Kingston, volume's a little bit more up and down. He's going up against that Texas Tech defense that is a real tough out. And yeah, projections don't even see these two as close at all. Toney, top 12 wide receiver. Parker Kingston outside of our top 100. I would personally agree with that. So footballer 1, if that answers your question. Yeah, is Toney a must-start going forward? I would say Toney's pretty close to a must-start going forward. I think he's pretty dang high in... Okay, he's wide receiver 38 on the year, but I think fantasy points per game, he is pretty up there. Fantasy points per game. Okay, he's wide receiver 40, so not quite as high as... But also, again, he had the slow start and everything, right? So... Maybe not, but I would definitely prefer him over Kingston going forward. And my rest of season rankings, I'm pretty sure have view Toney pretty highly as well. Yeah, total points 11, wide receiver 17, and fantasy points per game. So yeah, that'll help you out a little bit there. Footballer 1. All right, take a quick breather here as I got 15 minutes left on the stream. Justin Nunningham, non-sit start question here. He says, thoughts on NC State running back Duke Scott to close out the year if Smothers is out for a while. So I guess the question here, or not, I guess, I know what he's trying to ask, and that is what are my thoughts on Duke Scott if, God forbid, Dalen Smothers is out for an extended period of time? I think he's phenomenal. I think he's great. I think he looked like a 1-to-1 replacement for Smothers if Smothers is out. The problem is we have zero idea when Smothers is coming back. Right, so that's a huge issue, and that's not a game I'm quite ready to play. Obviously, if you're in a dynasty league or a keeper league, probably one to watch out for, especially if Smothers does move on after this year. Scott will be sitting there ready to take over. But yeah, if we get word that Smothers is out this weekend, yeah, run to the waiver wire and pick up Scott for the weekend if you need a spot starter for running back this week. But again, that's only if we get word that Smothers is out. All right, let's see, just making sure we get through everything. It looks like we mostly have questions from people that have already asked one. So we'll scroll back up and try to see if we spot any of ones from before that had a second question. Yeah, we'll go ahead and start with Todd Skid's question here. That says, if you have time, I guess this is DST. It says Notre Dame versus Navy or Toledo versus NIU. NIU's offense isn't great, but go back and look at what Notre Dame has done to poor triple option teams the last couple of years. Triple option teams are fun. They're great. They don't scale up well in terms of talent hardly at all. And we saw it for years when Georgia played Georgia Tech. We saw it really recently with Notre Dame playing against Navy and Army in recent years. Some of the best Navy and Army teams we've seen in years, Notre Dame took care of them like you wouldn't believe. So I would go with Notre Dame versus Navy there at the DST spot. And then your three options at quarterback, Alonzo Barnett, Bryson Barnes, or Micah Alejado. Barnett's a must start there. I think that's a great spot. I can take a look at Utah State, Nevada, over under 53.5. Utah State favored by 8.5 points there. That's an all right start. That's an all right touchdown opportunity. I'm a little worried about Utah State after they kind of blew it versus New Mexico. I would say that's a decent start, but not like a phenomenal start either. And then who's other? Oh, Alejado. We're typing in. Good Lord, Hawaii. Yeah, Vegas is expecting decent scoring in this game, but nothing crazy. So in that case, I would probably go with Barnes and Barnett just to get the dual threat ability and get the rushing upside there. Rishi Patel, he asked a question earlier. He said, should I try to trade Snow for Nick McMillan? My wide receiver core is Jeremiah Smith, Ted Hurst, Skylar Bell, Victor Snow, and Easton Mester. I mean, yeah, I would say that McMillan is a better start going forward than Snow. I did discuss this on the waiver wire show this week, talking about how like Snow's still getting touchdowns, but McMillan's by far the target hog right now, and he'll get touchdowns eventually. And so if you can flip McMillan for Snow, go ahead. I just don't know if somebody already owns McMillan, if they're not fully aware of that's what's going on, and they're going to be able to see through you trying to give them Snow for McMillan. So that's just my general thoughts there. Got a host of questions here at the end for quote unquote if I have time, which I do. David Burley, another question here. He says, Jared, if you have time, Maeva starting right now, but could pick up Castellanos, Hoover, or Fafita. Would either of these options be better this week and rest of season? I would say Hoover is a great pickup over Maeva. Like, Maeva has been really good so far this season, right? Like, Maeva, where is he at? He was here. I just saw him. I feel like I see him, and then he disappears. These names all blurred. Oh, it was down here. QB 32. Hoover one spot above him. I like Hoover better rest of season. Just like looking at my rest of season rankings here. Hoover, I've got fantasy points per game 40, but total 22 points versus Maeva. Okay, not that much farther back, I'd say. But still, like QB 44 fantasy points per game. So not a huge gap between those two. And then let's see, Castellanos. Castellanos versus Clemson's a pretty spicy matchup. I gotta say, I like that quite a bit. And my rest of season projections like him a lot here as well. Total points, 14 points. They don't have another bye week, so that helps them out a ton. Fantasy points per game, they're 28. So again, pretty solid start going forward, just every single week there. And Fafita, curious to see what my projections have him at. 19 total. 37 fantasy points per game. So I would say that Castellanos is your best bet there as long as he doesn't get hurt again. So yeah, that's where I would go with that. Again, Maeva, I'm very, very squeamish going forward. I think there's some tough matchups ahead for him. Joe Webb, another question from you, says, I need to start 4-point passing touchdowns, Joe Fognano versus Duke, or Connor Weigman versus UCF, or Josh Hoover versus Iowa State. Again, that Duke-UConn matchup could be absolutely phenomenal this week for fantasy points. I would go Fognano, just going up against that terrible, terrible Duke secondary. That's just my general thoughts there. Miss Rev says, if you can do another for PPR, start two for a flex, Lincoln Pear, Easton Messer, or Jamari Taylor. Let's go ahead and plug these into projections here, because I'm curious to see PPR-wise. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to hit my mic there. Here's to see PPR-wise what we're kind of expecting here. There we go. All right, so yeah, Pear and Jamari Taylor are the top two ones here. Makes sense. You're talking about two RB1s for their respective teams. Wake Forest defense a little worrisome there. Again, Taylor has definitely had to rely on some good matchups recently to kind of put himself over the top. Versus Messer, again, that Tulsa game I think is a better matchup. I personally would go with Pear and Messer among these two, which is crazy because I think Taylor's a top 12 running back on the year right now. Yeah, top number 11 on the year. But again, so much of that has to do with his touchdowns. And that game versus Wake Forest, I don't think is expected to be particularly high scoring. Yeah, 48.5 is the over-under. Virginia favored by about a touchdown. So you're very much, if you start Taylor, you're relying on him finding the end zone at least once, and I think that's a bit of a tall order. Tyler says, late to reply, but I actually disagree about Hemby. He's outscored Black in 4 of the last 5 and outcarried him in all of the last 5. I will consider benching him, though, because I have Omar Cooper, too. I mean, Cooper's definitely been great, but again, like, let's take a look at Hemby. So Hemby recently. Okay, I'll give you this. Again, the volume's a lot better than I was kind of remembering there. 18, 19 touches per game, hitting that 80 yards, a touchdown. But then you also have this. Then you got this possibility. This nightmare scenario that you get against Michigan State here where he only got 6 carries. I don't know if he got hurt, banged up, or whatever in that game. It could very well be that he does better down the stretch. But again, it is still Penn State's defense, right? Against the run, Penn State, okay, not nearly as good as I remember them being, All right, my pulse on Indiana and just the Big Ten teams right now, not so great. Maybe I'll just shut up and eat this one. Again, Hemby not particularly great in my rest of season rankings. Again, I do wonder again if it's just not quite capturing that latest momentum that he's getting. Oh my God, what kind of word was that? This is how you know I'm close to my bedtime. So, yeah, I mean, good points about Hemby. I'll go back to your question real quick, see if that kind of changes my mind a little bit. Yeah, I'll change my answer here, Tyler. Let's go Amari Miller. We'll go Hemby, especially if Hemby can get a couple receptions. Don't mention the nightmare scenario, Jared. It's my job, Tyler. I gotta give you every possible way that this could go. But obviously, he bounced back really well after that point, so you have to hope that continues from there. Let's see. Rishi says, I don't know why this switch happened for Nick and Snow. Seems like they're feeding Snow like crazy. It has everything to do with Nick McMillan's health. Nick McMillan has been made of glass the last couple of years. In previous years, they've just taken him out of games. This year, he's been just injured enough to where they can't feature him, but he's not injured enough to where they can take him out of the game. He's much more healthier now than he was in the middle portion of the season here, and that's why that switch has happened there, Rishi. Matty I says, much respect for what you're doing in the community, brother. Matty, appreciate you, man. You're always a blast to talk to. Didi says, hey guys, which wide receiver to start this week? Iverson Hooks at Rice, Carnell Tate at Purdue, Bo Sparks at UL Lafayette. My gut feel there is to go with Sparks, but if I remember correctly, he has not performed particularly well in recent weeks. Okay, never mind. I'm a liar. Against Marshall, again, over 100 yards, 60, 70 yards. Yeah, again, it's. You said this is full point PPR. Let me go check your last question there, CD. Did you ever say that this is full point PPR? You did not. That's fine though. Yeah, I'm definitely between Carnell Tate and Bo Sparks here. Iverson Hooks, I was excited about him for about a week there, and then it seems like they're back to featuring a new wide receiver every single week, so that definitely sucks. Let me plug in Sparks and Tate here into our projections. Obviously, it looks like Sparks is heavily up, and Tate's pretty good there as well. Yeah, I'm gonna go against projections here. I just really like that Texas State Louisiana matchup there. Just given how high scoring this is expected to be, 64.5. Both teams expected to go back and forth. Versus Ohio State, I have to imagine they are favored by a good 30 points. They're favored by. That screams to me that this could end up being a week where the running backs get a ton of work and the wide receivers kind of take off a little bit. I know if you have a Jeremiah Smith or a Carnell Tate or a Julian Saying, that's not what you really want to hear at this point. But that's just my honest feel on the game, at least when it comes to kind of breaking ties like this. Like, if you got no other options, yeah, throw Carnell Tate out there. I'm throwing Carnell Tate out in a league or two. But compared to like Bo Sparks, who's relatively comparable, at least in terms of, performance on the year, like, yeah, Bo Sparks here, wide receiver 17. Tate is wide receiver 23. So, yeah, comparable guys. Let's go with the better, higher scoring matchup, I would say, between the two. So, that being said, I think we are finished for this week, unless we get any last-minute questions here. I'm trying to think if there's any more final thoughts I want to throw out there. I would say, yeah, I guess that if you're on the bubble for your league, go big or go home. I would play with a lot more upside. I'd be a lot more willing to, go out of my way. If you're on the bubble, right, or especially if you're on the outside looking in, play with more upside. Definitely go for it. If you're, already in the top 6, or you are, feeling pretty good about like sitting where you're at to make it to the playoff, just play it conservative this week. That's just kind of my general thoughts there. Rishi has one last question here, just a very simple question. Can I mention again how to get to those rest of season rankings? Yes, I can. I can't remember if you guys can fully see the top of the screen here, but again, when you go to, yeah, you can. When you go to campusofcanton.com, you can look at the CFF tab here, and it is the first one there, rest of season rankings. We got it split between our weekly rankings or rest of season rankings. And if you are oh so curious, you can go back and take a look at what our CFF preseason rankings are. If you want to make fun of me for some of the terrible rankings, they're still there. I don't change them. So if you want to DM me and say, bro, what the heck were you thinking with X, Y, and Z? I'll take it, man. Again, I'm looking forward to spending a little bit of time and doing some postseason lessons learned. So having those available will definitely help. And I would not touch these dynasty rankings. I've been bad, y'all. I've been bad. Next year, I'm going to try to find a way to make myself more accountable and make it easier for me to keep these updated on the regular. Anyway, I'm getting off track. Appreciate all of you guys tuning in. You guys have been awesome tonight. Really appreciate hanging out with you guys every single time. And just like Rishi saying in the chat there, best of luck to you all getting into the playoffs and the playoff games afterwards. So appreciate all of you guys, and y'all have a wonderful and blessed week. See y'all.